On a dark, deserted street, a group of homeless men spots what they think is an easy target: a lone black woman walking home late at night. Little do they know, she's just returning from an intense Navy SEAL training session, her body and mind sharper than ever. When their vile intentions lead to a confrontation, she doesn't just defend herself, she leaves them broken, battered, and desperate for revenge. But their attempt to strike back will ignite a storm they never saw coming, as she shows them what it truly means to fight like a warrior. Don't forget to like and comment where you are from. Shadows of the night. The city hummed with the quiet tension of late-night stillness. The streetlights flickered intermittently along the desolate avenue, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. Tasha Monroe pulled her jacket tighter against the crisp night air as she walked briskly, her boots tapping steadily in rhythm with her quickened pace. She had just finished an intense 12-hour training session at the Navy SEAL prep facility, where she was one of only a handful of women and the only black candidate pushing through the grueling program. Tasha's mind replayed the day's exercises: hand-to-hand combat drills, mental endurance tests, and the brutal swim through icy waters. Her body ached, her muscles burning with exhaustion, but she welcomed the pain. It was proof of her strength, her determination to defy expectations. The Navy SEALs were her goal, and nothing, no obstacle, no stereotype, was going to stop her. Her focus was so sharp that she didn't notice the group of men lurking in the shadows of a boarded-up storefront. They spotted her immediately. A lone woman, walking down an empty street, far from prying eyes. "Hey, check this out," one of them muttered, nudging the man beside him. The others turned, their eyes narrowing as they surveyed Tasha. There were 4 of them, unkempt, gaunt, and reeking of desperation. They had been drinking, their movements erratic but their intentions chillingly clear. "She's perfect," one of them said, his voice slurring. Tasha sensed the shift in the air before she saw them. Her instincts, honed from years of training, picked up the faint scuffle of footsteps behind her. She glanced over her shoulder, her sharp eyes locking onto the group. They were following her, their pace quickening to close the distance. Her heart rate spiked, not with fear, but with adrenaline. Stay calm. Assess. Plan. Execute. The Navy mantra echoed in her mind. She subtly adjusted her gait, her hand inching toward the small, concealed blade she carried out of habit. The men began calling out to her, their taunts dripping with malice. "Hey, sweetheart, where you headed? Come on, don't ignore us, we just want to talk. Bet you're real sweet under all that attitude." Tasha didn't respond. She kept walking, her posture tall and her shoulders squared. But her pulse quickened. She didn't fear what they could do to her. She feared what she might have to do to them. She had been trained to neutralize threats with precision and force, a skill set she hoped never to use outside of the battlefield. When she reached the corner of the street, she paused briefly to assess her options. The men were gaining on her, their voices louder, more aggressive. Turning down the next block would take her into an even darker, more isolated area, but doubling back would put her face to face with them. "Damn, she's fast," one of the men muttered. "Hey, lady, we're talking to you." Tasha sighed deeply. If they wanted a fight, they had picked the wrong woman. She stopped abruptly, turning to face them. Her expression was calm, unreadable, but her eyes gleamed with a quiet fury that sent a chill down the spine of the man closest to her. He faltered briefly, but quickly masked it with bravado. "What do you want?" Tasha asked, her voice steady and authoritative. The men exchanged glances, momentarily surprised by her lack of fear. One of them stepped forward, grinning. He was taller than the others, his greasy hair hanging over his face. "Just being friendly, sweetheart," he said, his tone mocking. "You look like you could use some company." "Yeah," another chimed in. "Why don't you come hang out with us for a bit? We'll keep you warm." Tasha tilted her head, studying them like a predator sizing up prey. Her mind calculated every possible outcome. 4 men, drunk, sloppy, aggressive. She could take them, but she needed to avoid drawing attention. If this turned into a full-blown scene, it could jeopardize her position in the SEAL program. "Turn around and walk away," she said firmly, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "You don't want this fight." The leader laughed, his bravado masking a flicker of unease. "Fight? "Sweetheart, we're not here to fight, we just want to have a little fun." He lunged forward, grabbing at her arm. In one fluid motion, Tasha sidestepped him, twisting his wrist and forcing him to the ground with a speed and precision that left the others stunned. The man let out a yelp of pain as she pressed her knee into his back, pinning him. The others froze, their bravado replaced with uncertainty. "What the hell?" one of them muttered. Tasha locked eyes with them, her voice low and commanding. "Leave now, and I'll let him go." But the men weren't ready to back down. Emboldened by their numbers, they moved toward her, their fists clenched. "Big mistake," Tasha muttered under her breath. She released the man on the ground and sprang into action. The first punch came at her head, but she ducked effortlessly, countering with a sharp jab to his ribs. Another man swung a makeshift weapon, a broken bottle, but she disarmed him with a quick twist of his wrist, sending the glass shattering to the ground. One by one, they fell. Tasha's movements were precise, controlled and brutal. Her training took over, muscle memory guiding her strikes and takedowns. Within minutes, the men were sprawled on the pavement, groaning in pain. Tasha stood over them, her breathing steady, her adrenaline coursing. She wiped her hands on her jeans and stepped back. "Don't ever follow me again," she warned, her voice cold and sharp. "Next time you won't get off this easy." She turned and walked away, her silhouette disappearing into the shadows of the night. But as she moved, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this wasn't over. Men like them didn't forget humiliation, and their bruised egos would demand revenge. Little did they know Tasha Monroe was ready for anything, lurking shadows. The bruised and battered men huddled under the yellow glow of a street lamp, their faces etched with humiliation and rage. The leader, who introduced himself only as Daryl, nursed his swollen wrist, his teeth clenched in pain. His friends, Mitch, a wiry man with a chipped front tooth, Vince, whose lip bled profusely, and Greg, the youngest and most uncertain of the group, shared glances of disbelief. "She made fools of us," Mitch spat, his voice thick with venom. "Some girl. Did you see what she did to Vince? Man, this ain't normal." Daryl's jaw tightened. He didn't care how skilled she was. All he could think about was the humiliation of being taken down by a single woman in front of his crew. His ego throbbed harder than the bruises on his face. "She's no ordinary girl," Daryl growled. "But I don't care what she is. She messed with the wrong people. No one does this to me and gets away with it." Greg hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "Daryl, maybe we should let it go. She's different. Dangerous." "Different?" Daryl barked, his eyes narrowing as he stepped toward Greg. "So you scared of her, huh? That's what you're saying?" Greg's gaze fell to the pavement, his lips pressing into a thin line. He wasn't scared, but he wasn't stupid either. What he saw in that woman's eyes wasn't just confidence. It was the kind of calculated calm he'd only seen in combat veterans. Mitch wiped his bloody nose with his sleeve and grinned darkly. "She's just a woman. We weren't ready, that's all. Next time, we'll be prepared." Vince nodded, though his hands trembled slightly. "Yeah, we get her alone, no distractions, no escape. She'll regret messing with us." Daryl smirked, the fire in his eyes reigniting. "Damn right. We find her, and this time, we make sure she learns her place." The group fell silent as their resolve hardened. None of them noticed the dark SUV idling at the corner, its windows tinted, its engine barely audible. Inside, a man in a black jacket watched them closely, his eyes narrowing with interest as the group's plans unfolded. He had followed Tasha from the Navy SEAL facility, his orders clear. Observe, report, and intervene only if necessary. For now, he remained unseen. Tasha entered her modest one-bedroom apartment, locking the door behind her with practiced precision. She placed her duffel bag on the floor and leaned against the wall, exhaling deeply. The events of the night replayed in her mind, but she pushed them aside. She couldn't afford to let her focus waver. Not now, not with her sealed candidacy hanging by a thread. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and she walked over to check the message. "Tasha, great work today. Keep your focus. Prep for the endurance trial tomorrow. Remember, you've earned your spot here. Don't let anyone question it." A faint smile tugged at her lips. Chief Anders was one of the few people who believed in her unconditionally. even when others doubted her capabilities. As the only black woman in her SEAL prep group, Tasha knew she was under a microscope. Every misstep, every mistake would be magnified tenfold. She glanced at the corner of the living room, where a small display case held a folded American flag and a collection of medals. Her father, a decorated Marine, had instilled in her the values of discipline and perseverance. His voice echoed in her mind. You fight with your head, not just your fists. And when the world underestimates you, that's when you show them your strength. Tasha's resolve strengthened. Whatever came next, she would be ready. The next evening, Tasha's routine resumed. She left the training facility late, her body aching from the brutal endurance trials. As she walked home, her senses remained on high alert. The confrontation with the men the previous night lingered in her thoughts. She hadn't expected them to take their beating quietly. Men like that thrived on revenge. The streets were quieter than usual, the faint hum of distant traffic blending with the occasional bark of a dog. Tasha adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, her eyes scanning every alleyway and shadowed corner. Then she saw it, a glint of movement in the periphery. Her pace slowed as she approached an intersection. Her hand slipped into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the small tactical knife she always carried. She pivoted sharply, her eyes locking onto a figure lurking in the shadows. It was Daryl. "Evening, sweetheart," he called out, stepping into the dim light of a nearby street lamp. His grin was predatory, his tone dripping with malice. Tasha's jaw tightened. She didn't respond, her posture shifting subtly into a defensive stance. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Daryl continued, motioning for his crew to step forward. Mitch, Vince, and Greg emerged from the darkness, their expressions twisted with determination. "This time," Daryl said, cracking his knuckles, "we're gonna finish what you started." Tasha's heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. She had warned them once and they had ignored her. Now they would learn the consequences of their arrogance. "You boys sure you want to do this?" she asked calmly, her voice steady. Daryl laughed. "Oh, we're sure. You caught us off guard last time." "Not happening again." Tasha dropped her bag to the ground, her movements deliberate. She rolled her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the men as they encircled her. "Last chance to walk away," she said, her tone carrying a quiet menace. Daryl sneered. "We ain't going anywhere." Tasha smirked, her grip tightening on the handle of her knife. "Your funeral." The tension snapped like a taut wire, and the men charged. Tasha's body moved instinctively, her training taking over as she countered their every move. The fight was brutal, chaotic, and swift. She ducked under Mitch's wild swing, delivering a sharp elbow to his ribs that sent him crumpling to the ground. Greg hesitated, his punches sloppy and uncertain, giving Tasha the opening she needed to sweep his legs out from under him. Daryl was more aggressive, his fists flying with raw anger. But Tasha was faster, her movements calculated. She blocked his strike and twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees with a pained grunt. Vince, desperate and reckless, lunged at her with a broken bottle. Tasha sidestepped effortlessly, disarming him with a precise kick that sent the bottle skittering across the pavement. Within minutes it was over. The men lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain. Tasha stood over them, her breathing steady, her expression unreadable. "Stay down," she warned, her voice cold and commanding. "Next time you won't walk away." But as she turned to leave, a chilling realization washed over her. These men weren't just angry, they were desperate. Desperate people didn't give up easily. And she knew deep down this was only the beginning. Escalation. The following day, the tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. For Tasha, the events of the previous night were both a warning and a reminder. She had proven her strength once again, but she knew the kind of men she was dealing with. They weren't going to let their humiliation slide. Daryl and his crew had been beaten twice now, and men like them wouldn't stop until they regained control, no matter the cost. At the Navy SEAL training facility, Tasha pushed herself harder than ever. The grueling physical trials and mental tests were relentless, but they were also her sanctuary. Here she was untouchable, surrounded by peers who respected her capabilities. even if some begrudged her presence. During a break, Chief Anders approached her with a clipboard in hand. His weathered face softened as he stopped beside her. "You've been quiet today, Carter," he said, using her last name as he always did. "Something on your mind?" Tasha wiped the sweat from her brow and shook her head. "Nothing I can't handle, Chief." Anders studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes scanning her face. "That's not an answer." Tasha hesitated, debating how much to reveal. Chief Anders was one of the few people she trusted, but she wasn't sure if this situation warranted his involvement. "It's personal," she finally said. Anders nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Personal's fine, as long as it doesn't distract you. But remember, Carter, no one gets through this alone. If you need backup, you know where to find me." "Understood, Chief," Tasha replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. His words were reassuring, even if she wasn't ready to act on them. Across town, in the dimly lit back room of a rundown bar, Daryl sat nursing a beer, his injured hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Mitch, Vince, and Greg sat around him, their faces a mix of anger and unease. "We can't keep doing this," Greg muttered, his voice barely audible. "She's gonna kill us if we try again." Daryl slammed his bottle on the table, the sound reverberating through the room. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't know we're outmatched?" Mitch leaned forward, his voice low. "Then what's the plan, Daryl? You've got one, right?" A slow, malicious grin spread across Daryl's face. "We can't beat her in a straight fight. Fine, we don't need to. We just need to hit her where it hurts." Greg frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Daryl said, his tone dripping with malice, "we find out who she is, where she goes, what she cares about. We make her regret ever crossing us." Vince, his lips still swollen from the previous night, nodded slowly. "She's got to have a weakness, everyone does." Daryl reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "We start with this." Mitch snatched the paper and squinted at the address scribbled on it. "What's this?" "Her place," Daryl replied. "Figured it out last night. We'll pay her a little visit." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Daryl, I don't know about this. Breaking into her place? That's a whole different level." Daryl's eyes narrowed. "You scared, Greg? You want to walk away? Go ahead. But if you're with us, you shut up and follow orders." Greg didn't respond, his silence a reluctant agreement. Tasha's instincts screamed at her as she approached her apartment. The quiet neighborhood felt different tonight, the usual stillness tinged with something darker. She slowed her steps, scanning her surroundings with the heightened awareness honed from years of training. Then she saw it, a shadow moving near the side of her building. Her heart rate quickened, but her expression remained calm. She had been expecting this. Tasha circled around the building, keeping to the darkness. She spotted them near the back entrance, Daryl and Vince, their postures tense as they tried to force the lock. Mitch stood a few feet away, acting as a lookout. Greg was nowhere to be seen. She approached silently, her steps light and deliberate. The men were so focused on their task that they didn't notice her until it was too late. "Looking for something." Tasha's voice cut through the night like a blade. The men froze, their heads snapping toward her. Daryl recovered first, his lips curling into a sneer. "You just can't mind your business, can you?" Tasha took a step closer, her stance loose but ready. "My business is making sure you don't do something you'll regret." Vince laughed nervously, but it was Mitch who broke first. "Daryl, this is a bad idea. Let's just go." "Shut up!" Daryl barked, his hand darting to his pocket. He pulled out a switchblade, the blade gleaming in the dim light. "You don't scare me, lady." Tasha's eyes flicked to the knife, then back to Daryl. "You sure about that?" Before he could respond, Tasha moved. Her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist and twisting it sharply. The knife clattered to the ground as Daryl cried out in pain. She kicked the weapon away and turned her attention to the others. "Anyone else want to try?" she asked, her tone deadly calm. Vince and Mitch hesitated, their confidence crumbling. Mitch took a step back, raising his hands. "We're done. This isn't worth it." Daryl, still clutching his wrist, glared at him. "Cowards! She's just one person. She's one person who just took you down. Again, Vince muttered, backing away. Tasha stepped closer to Daryl, her voice low. This is your last warning. Stay away from me, stay away from my home. If I see you again, I won't hold back. Daryl didn't respond, his face twisted in anger and pain. He stumbled to his feet, muttering curses under his breath as he and his crew retreated into the night. Tasha watched them go, her heart pounding. She knew this wasn't over. Daryl's hatred ran too deep, his pride too wounded, but she also knew she couldn't let her guard down, not for a second. As she stepped back into her apartment, Tasha felt the weight of the night pressing down on her. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, her mind racing with possibilities. She needed a plan, something definitive to end this once and for all. Retaliation. Daryl's bruised ego festered like an open wound. The sting of being overpowered twice by a woman, especially one he had underestimated so completely, consumed him. Back in the dimly lit hideout, he paced like a caged animal, his mind racing with thoughts of vengeance. Vince and Mitch sat in tense silence while Greg stared out the window, visibly uneasy. This isn't over, Daryl growled, slamming his fist on the table. She thinks she can humiliate me and walk away? Not a chance. Daryl, Mitch said cautiously, we've already tried twice and it's backfired both times. Maybe it's time to let this go. Let it go? Daryl's voice rose sharply. Do you have any idea what people are saying about us? We're a joke because of her. She's dangerous, Vince interjected, rubbing the still healing bruise on his jaw. We're outmatched, man. Let's cut our losses before someone gets seriously hurt. Daryl shot him a glare. She's one person, one. We've been playing it soft, but not anymore. Greg turned from the window, his voice quiet, but firm. What's the plan, Daryl? Because if it's more of the same, I'm out. Daryl smirked, a sinister glint in his eyes. We don't fight her. We make her life impossible. She wants to act like she's untouchable? Fine. We'll hit her where it really hurts. Mitch frowned. What does that even mean? Daryl pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and slapped it onto the table. I got her name, full name, did a little digging. Turns out she's not just some tough girl, she's military, Navy SEAL. The room fell silent. Even Daryl's bravado wavered for a moment as the weight of that revelation settled in. You're telling me we've been messing with a SEAL? Vince asked, his voice trembling slightly. Daryl scoffed. Yeah, and that's why we're gonna hit her where she doesn't expect it. We can't take her in a fight, but we can ruin her life. Greg shook his head. Daryl, this is insane. If she's military, you think the cops or even the feds won't get involved if we push too far? That's why we don't get caught, Daryl snapped. We make her look like the bad guy. Tasha wasn't naive. She knew men like Daryl didn't give up easily. Their bruised pride and warped sense of dominance wouldn't allow it. That night, she combed through her apartment, reinforcing locks, setting up small but effective deterrents and ensuring her concealed carry weapon was loaded and within reach. She had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary, but she wasn't taking any chances. Her phone buzzed on the counter, breaking her focus. It was Chief Anders. Carter, got a minute? He asked when she answered. Of course, Chief. What's up? Had an interesting conversation with a buddy in local law enforcement, Anders said. They're getting wind of some trouble around your neighborhood. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Tasha hesitated. She hadn't reported the incidents, preferring to handle them herself. Nothing I can't handle, Chief. That's not what I asked, Anders replied sharply. If this is something that could escalate, I need to know. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. Tasha exhaled, weighing her words carefully. There are some guys who've been persistent, but I've got it under control. Carter, you're one of the best, but don't be stupid. You've got resources. Use them. Yes, Chief, Tasha said, though she wasn't entirely sure she meant it. As the call ended, Tasha's resolve hardened. She couldn't let this drag on. It wasn't just her safety at stake, it was her dignity, her freedom to walk her own streets without fear. Over the next few days, Daryl and his crew escalated their efforts. They followed Tasha at a distance, careful to remain undetected. They tampered with her car, left threatening notes near her door, and spread rumors about her around the neighborhood. It was a coordinated campaign of harassment designed to unnerve her, to make her feel powerless. But Tasha wasn't rattled. She saw through their tactics and decided to turn the tables. One evening, as she walked home from a late training session, she intentionally took a route that passed through a dimly lit alleyway. She knew they were following her. She had spotted them several blocks back. The alley was narrow and lined with dumpsters, providing the perfect setting for what she had planned. She slowed her pace, allowing them to catch up. The sound of their footsteps grew louder, their whispers more audible. "She's heading into the alley," Vince murmured. "This is it." Tasha stopped and turned to face them. "You boys lost?" she asked, her tone calm but laced with warning. Daryl stepped forward, a crowbar in his hand. "Not lost, sweetheart. Just here to remind you of your place." Tasha's lips curled into a cold smile. "Funny, I was about to do the same for you." Before they could react, Tasha reached into her jacket and pulled out a tactical flashlight. She clicked it on, the intense beam of light blinding them momentarily. In the disorientation, she moved swiftly, her training kicking in. She disarmed Daryl with a sharp twist of his wrist, the crowbar clattering to the ground. A well-placed kick sent Mitch sprawling, while Vince stumbled backward, tripping over a trash can. Greg, who had hung back, froze in place, unsure whether to intervene or run. Within seconds, the fight was over. Daryl lay on the ground, clutching his ribs and groaning in pain. Mitch and Vince scrambled to their feet, their faces pale with fear. Tasha stood over them, her expression steely. "This ends now," she said, her voice low and commanding. "You come near me again and you'll wish you hadn't." Daryl glared up at her, his defiance flickering. "You think you're untouchable?" Tasha leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, but I am unstoppable." As the men retreated, Greg lingered for a moment, his gaze meeting Tasha's. There was something in his eyes, shame perhaps, or regret. Then he turned and followed the others, disappearing into the shadows. The counterattack. As Daryl and his crew limped away from the confrontation in the alley, the seeds of their resentment grew into something darker. Tasha's unwavering confidence and decisive actions had stripped them of their perceived power, and Daryl, humiliated yet again, resolved to retaliate in a way that would truly hurt her. "We need to stop going at her directly," Daryl muttered as they regrouped in their hideout. His ribs ached from the blows Tasha had delivered, but his pride hurt even more. "She's not just some tough chick. She's trained. We have to think smarter." Vince, still nursing his injuries, looked wary. "Smarter how? She's already 2 steps ahead of us." Daryl glared at him. "Not for long. We don't have to touch her to ruin her life." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through social media and local forums. His eyes lit up as an idea formed. "We're going to make her the problem. Everyone loves a hero until they don't." Greg, sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. "You're going to make this worse, Daryl. She hasn't just beaten us. She's exposed us. People are already talking. If we push this any further, it's going to blow up in our faces." "Then leave," Daryl snapped, his tone venomous. "But I'm not going to let some woman, some military wannabe, think she's better than me." Greg didn't respond, his jaw tightening as he looked away. The unease in his expression didn't go unnoticed. The next morning, Tasha woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly. She reached for it, squinting at the screen. Her heart sank as she saw dozens of notifications from neighbors, friends, and even strangers. The messages ranged from concerned to accusatory. "Did you really do this? How could you? This doesn't sound like you, but it's all over the place." Confused, Tasha opened her social media accounts and saw the onslaught. Edited photos and fabricated stories portrayed her as a violent vigilante who used her military training to target innocent people. Posts claimed she had attacked multiple homeless men unprovoked, branding her as a bully and a menace. One post stood out, a poorly edited video clip that showed Tasha confronting Daryl and his crew, but with the context removed. The caption read, "Local woman assaults struggling men trying to ask for help. Is this who we want in our community?" Tasha's chest tightened as she scrolled through the comments. Most people were outraged, but a few defended her, mentioning her military background and previous acts of kindness in the neighborhood. Still, The damage was evident. The narrative was spiraling out of her control. Her phone buzzed again. It was Chief Anders. "Tasha," he began, his tone measured but firm. "I just got off a call with some community leaders. They're asking questions about you." "It's not true," Tasha said immediately. "Those men, I know you," Anders interrupted. "And I know this isn't like you. But perception matters. If this keeps gaining traction, it could affect your career, your relationships, everything." Tasha clenched her jaw. "What do you suggest?" "Get ahead of it," Anders advised. "Tell your story. Set the record straight before they turn you into a villain." Tasha thanked him and hung up, her mind racing. She wasn't one to shy away from a fight, but this was different. This wasn't a physical confrontation she could win with skill and strategy. This was a battle for her reputation, her honor. Across town, Greg sat alone in a diner, nursing a cup of coffee. The events of the past few weeks weighed heavily on him. He had joined Daryl's crew out of desperation, drawn by their camaraderie and shared hardships, but things had gone too far. Watching Tasha dismantle them, not just physically but morally, had forced him to reevaluate his choices. Greg's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone vibrating. It was a message from Daryl. "Meeting tonight. Be there. We're finishing this." Greg stared at the screen, a knot forming in his stomach. He typed out a response but hesitated before hitting send. Instead, he pocketed the phone and left the diner, a sense of resolve settling over him. Tasha spent the day gathering evidence to counter the false narrative. She compiled photos, videos, and witness statements from neighbors who had seen Daryl and his crew harassing her. With the help of a friend who worked in cybersecurity, she traced some of the defamatory posts back to accounts linked to Daryl. That evening, she recorded a video in her apartment, speaking directly to her community. "My name is Tasha Carter," she began, her voice steady. "Some of you may have seen posts about me recently. I want you to hear the truth from me." She detailed the events leading up to the fabricated accusations, presenting her evidence clearly and concisely. She didn't shy away from her actions, but framed them in the context of self-defense and protecting her community. "I will not stand by while lies are spread to protect those who prey on others," she said, her tone unwavering. "I have always believed in justice, and I will continue to fight for it, no matter what." The video went viral within hours. Support poured in from people who recognized her bravery and integrity. Her military background, once twisted into a weapon against her, became a badge of honor. Local veterans groups and community leaders publicly voiced their support, further shifting the narrative in her favor. As Tasha's video gained traction, Daryl's crew began to unravel. Vince and Mitch, already wary of the escalating conflict, distanced themselves from Daryl, refusing to attend the meeting he had planned. Greg, however, decided to confront Daryl directly. "You're done, Daryl," Greg said, standing in the doorway of the hideout. "Tasha's already outsmarted you, and now the whole neighborhood's on her side." Daryl sneered, his fists clenching. "You think I care what they think? She humiliated us." "She stopped you," Greg corrected, "and now you're dragging the rest of us down with you." Daryl lunged at Greg, but Greg sidestepped him easily, years of street smarts kicking in. "You're on your own," Greg said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm done." As Greg walked away, Daryl stood alone, his fury simmering, but for the first time, he realized just how isolated he had become. The trap. The fallout from Tasha's video rippled through the community like a shockwave. The tide of public opinion had turned firmly in her favor, but Tasha knew better than to think Daryl would simply back down. People like him didn't admit defeat. They lashed out when cornered. Late one evening, as Tasha returned from another meeting with local veterans supporting her cause, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old factory. I have information you'll want." The message was cryptic, but it piqued her curiosity. Her instincts screamed that it could be a setup, but her SEAL training kicked in immediately. She copied the number and sent it to her cybersecurity friend to trace, then armed herself with her concealed weapon and a tactical flashlight. Tasha never walked into unknown situations unprepared. The old factory loomed in the distance, its silhouette jagged against the darkened sky. The place had been abandoned for years, a relic of better economic times. Tasha parked her car a block away and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows. She scanned her surroundings, noting potential escape routes and vantage points. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of rust and decay. Tasha's footsteps echoed as she entered, her senses heightened. She could hear faint shuffling further in, the unmistakable sound of someone or several someones trying to stay quiet. "Daryl," she called out, her voice firm. "I know you're here. You want to talk? Then show yourself." Her voice echoed in the cavernous space, but no one answered. Instead, a sudden clanging noise to her left made her spin, her flashlight illuminating a broken pipe swaying on a chain. It was a distraction. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement, a figure lunging toward her. Tasha ducked instinctively, her training taking over. The man, a lanky figure she recognized as Vince, stumbled past her, cursing as he missed his mark. Two more figures emerged from the shadows, Daryl and Mitch. Both carried improvised weapons, a crowbar and a length of pipe. Tasha noted their stances and positioning, her mind calculating every possible angle. "This is how you want to settle it?" she asked, her tone calm but edged with steel. "3 against 1? Pathetic." Daryl smirked, circling her like a predator. "You think you're so tough, don't you? Let's see how tough you are when you don't have an audience cheering you on." Tasha didn't wait for them to make the first move. She stepped forward, closing the distance between her and Vince, and landed a sharp kick to his knee. He crumpled with a yell, dropping his weapon. Mitch swung his pipe at her, but Tasha ducked, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. He screamed in pain as she disarmed him. Daryl hesitated, clearly re-evaluating his plan. Tasha turned to him, her eyes blazing. "You've already lost, Daryl. Walk away before I make you regret it." But Daryl wasn't ready to back down. He charged at her with the crowbar, swinging wildly. Tasha sidestepped and delivered a punch to his ribs, followed by a knee to his stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. "Is that all you've got?" Tasha asked, her voice laced with disdain. Daryl, humiliated and enraged, stumbled to his feet. "You think this is over? Before he could finish, the sound of sirens cut through the night. The faint red and blue glow of police lights flickered through the factory's broken windows. Tasha had anticipated the possibility of escalation and tipped off Chief Anders before heading to the location. "You called the cops?" Daryl spat, his eyes wild. "You coward!" Tasha shrugged. "You brought this on yourself." The police burst into the factory, weapons drawn. Chief Anders led the charge, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. He immediately spotted Tasha standing over Daryl, who was still clutching his ribs. "Tasha," Anders said, motioning for her to step back. "We'll take it from here." She nodded, stepping aside as the officers secured Daryl and his crew. As Vince and Mitch were handcuffed, they exchanged nervous glances. Daryl, however, continued to glare at Tasha, his defiance unbroken even as he was led away. As the officers began processing the scene, Anders approached Tasha. "You handled yourself well," he said, his tone serious but approving. "But this could have gone sideways fast. Don't take risks like this again." Tasha offered a faint smile. "Calculated risk, Chief. I knew you'd have my back." Anders shook his head, a smirk tugging at his lips. "You're something else, Carter. Get home. You've earned some rest." The next day, news of the arrest spread quickly. The community, already rallying behind Tasha, now saw her as an even greater symbol of strength and resilience. Local news outlets covered the story, framing Tasha as a hero who had stood up against danger to protect her neighborhood. Daryl and his crew faced charges ranging from assault to conspiracy, and their reputations were tarnished beyond repair. Meanwhile, Tasha's video continued to gain traction online, sparking conversations about personal safety, community unity, and the strength of women in the face of adversity. As Tasha walked through her neighborhood that evening, she was greeted with nods, waves, and even a few words of thanks from strangers. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace. But Tasha knew her journey wasn't over. Her experience had highlighted deeper issues within her community, issues she couldn't ignore. Inspired by the support she had received, Tasha began laying the groundwork for a self-defense program aimed at empowering women and marginalized groups. She wanted to ensure that no one else would have to face what she had, alone and unprepared. That night, Tasha recorded a final message for her growing online audience. Sitting in her modest living room, she spoke with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through every challenge. "To everyone who stood by me, thank you," she began. "This isn't just my story, it's ours. It's about standing up, even when the odds are against you. It's about finding strength in your community and using that strength to protect each other." She paused, her gaze steady. "If you've ever felt powerless, know this. You're stronger than you think, and you're never truly alone." Tasha leaned forward slightly, her tone shifting to one of encouragement. "If this story inspired you, share it. Let it remind someone else that they can overcome whatever they're facing. And don't forget to like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to join a community of resilience and strength." Her final words lingered as the screen faded to black. Together, we rise, building resilience. The days following Daryl's arrest brought a whirlwind of emotions for Tasha. She had faced down her fears, defended herself against overwhelming odds, and emerged stronger than ever. Yet, she couldn't ignore the lingering sense of responsibility. Her personal battle was won, but the systemic challenges her community faced remained. Tasha spent her mornings meeting with local leaders, law enforcement, and activists. She pitched her vision for a self-defense program, emphasizing its importance for marginalized groups often left vulnerable. Her proposal was met with enthusiasm, and soon, the wheels were in motion to secure funding and resources. A month later, the gymnasium of the local community center buzzed with anticipation. Flyers had gone up across the neighborhood, social media posts had spread the word, and the response was overwhelming. Women of all ages, along with a few men, gathered for the inaugural session of Tasha's self-defense program, aptly named Empower. Tasha stood at the front of the room, her Navy SEAL insignia pinned to her chest. Her presence alone commanded respect, but her warm smile put everyone at ease. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice carrying across the room. "Tonight isn't just about learning how to defend yourself. It's about reclaiming your confidence, your strength, and your power." The crowd erupted in applause, and Tasha wasted no time diving into the basics. She demonstrated simple, effective techniques for breaking holds, deflecting attacks, and creating opportunities to escape. Her explanations were clear, her movements precise, and her encouragement unwavering. By the end of the session, the participants were sweaty but smiling, their confidence visibly bolstered. One woman, a middle-aged mother named Clara, approached Tasha after class. "I never thought I'd be able to do something like this," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for giving me hope." Tasha placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "The strength was always in you, Clara. I just showed you how to tap into it." Despite the success of the program, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that Daryl's arrest wasn't the end of the story. He was awaiting trial, but his connections in the community and his knack for manipulation worried her. She had seen how easily people like him could spin narratives to their advantage, and she wasn't about to let that happen. Tasha stayed vigilant, keeping tabs on the case through Chief Anders. The evidence against Daryl was strong, but Tasha knew the legal system wasn't infallible. She prepared herself for any outcome, determined to remain a step ahead. Her caution paid off when Anders called her late one evening. "Tasha, we've got a situation," he said, his tone grim. "One of Daryl's associates flipped. They claim Daryl's been trying to orchestrate something from inside." Tasha's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of something?" "A plan to discredit you," Anders replied. "He's using his connections to spread false accusations, trying to paint you as the aggressor." Tasha's jaw clenched. "Let him try. I'll handle it." The next morning, Tasha recorded a video addressing the rumors head-on. She stood in her living room, her SEAL badge prominently displayed beside her. "By now, some of you may have heard rumors questioning my actions and my integrity," she began, her tone steady. "Let me be clear, those rumors are lies spread by someone desperate to avoid accountability." She paused, her eyes locking with the camera. "I won't be silenced, and I won't back down. My actions were always in self-defense. and I'll continue to stand up for what's right, no matter who tries to tear me down." The video went viral within hours, amassing thousands of likes, comments, and shares. Support poured in from across the country, drowning out the lies and reaffirming Tasha's place as a symbol of resilience and justice. Months later, the courtroom was packed as Daryl's trial began. Tasha sat in the front row, her presence a reminder of the strength he had underestimated. The prosecution laid out a damning case, presenting video evidence, witness testimonies, and Tasha's own account of the attack. Daryl's defense attempted to shift blame, portraying him as a victim of circumstance, but their arguments crumbled under the weight of the evidence. When Tasha took the stand, her testimony was calm, precise, and devastatingly effective. "I didn't want to fight," she said, her voice steady. "But I had no choice. I was walking home minding my own business when they decided to make me their target. I defended myself because I had to, and I'll never apologize for that." The jury deliberated for less than an hour before delivering their verdict: guilty on all counts. Daryl was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with additional time for conspiracy charges. As he was led away in handcuffs, Tasha felt a wave of relief. Justice had prevailed. With the trial behind her, Tasha focused on expanding her program. Empower grew rapidly, attracting attention from local governments and national organizations. Grants poured in, allowing Tasha to hire additional instructors and open new locations. Her story continued to inspire, appearing in news segments, podcasts, and documentaries. But for Tasha, the true reward was seeing the impact firsthand, watching people walk into her classes uncertain and leave with their heads held high. One evening, after wrapping up a session, Tasha stood in the doorway of the gym, watching her students laugh and chat as they left. Clara approached her, beaming. "You've changed so many lives, Tasha," Clara said, "including mine." Tasha smiled. "We've all changed each other. That's the real power." Tasha recorded one last video, reflecting on her journey and the lessons she had learned. "Strength isn't just about muscles or combat skills," she said. "It's about standing up when you're knocked down. It's about protecting yourself and others. And it's about using your voice, even when it feels like no one's listening." She leaned closer to the camera, her expression earnest. "If this story resonated with you, share it. Let someone else see what's possible. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Together, we're building a community of strength, one step at a time." As the video ended, Tasha stood in her quiet living room, a sense of peace washing over her. She had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger. Now she was helping others find that strength within themselves. And for Tasha, that was the greatest victory of all. A message of strength. The sun was setting as Tasha stood on a makeshift stage in the heart of her community, surrounded by hundreds of people who had come to celebrate the one-year anniversary of Empower. The program had grown beyond her wildest dreams, transforming from a single self-defense class into a nationwide initiative. The crowd was a mix of students, supporters, and families whose lives had been touched by her mission. Tasha adjusted the microphone, her Navy SEAL insignia glinting in the golden light. She scanned the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude and pride. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "A year ago I walked home after training, not knowing my life would change forever. That night I was forced to fight, to protect myself against those who underestimated me. But what they didn't realize is that strength doesn't just come from training or discipline. It comes from knowing your worth, standing your ground, and refusing to give up." The audience erupted in applause, and Tasha smiled, pausing to let the words sink in. Tasha continued, her tone softening. "This past year has taught me more than I ever imagined. I've learned that strength isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and even collective. Together we've shown that we can rise above fear, hate, and violence to create something bigger than ourselves." She gestured to the students standing in the front row, Clara among them. "Each of you here tonight is proof that change is possible, that no matter what life throws at us, we can adapt, overcome, and thrive." The crowd nodded, many wiping away tears as they listened. Tasha took a deep breath, her gaze steady. But I didn't do this alone. To my team, my students, and everyone who believed in me, you are the reason this program exists. You are the ones carrying this mission forward, and I am endlessly grateful." She stepped aside, gesturing to the large banner behind her that read, "Together, we rise." The message was simple but powerful, embodying everything the past year had been about. Let's remember that we're not just learning to defend ourselves, we're learning to defend each other, to create a community where everyone feels safe, valued, and empowered. Tasha leaned into the microphone, her voice taking on a serious tone. "Now, I have one request for each of you. If this story, this journey, has meant something to you, don't let it stop here. Take what you've learned and share it. Talk to your friends, your family, your community. Let them know that strength comes from unity and that change starts with each of us." She smiled, her eyes glinting with determination. "And if you're watching this online, like this video, comment below and tell us where you're from. Share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Together we can reach even more people, inspire more action, and create a movement that lasts." The crowd erupted into applause as Tasha stepped back from the microphone, but she wasn't done. She returned to the mic, her voice firm and resolute. "This isn't the end of the story, it's just the beginning. Whether you're here tonight or watching from afar, remember this: you are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and more powerful than you know. Never forget that." The audience stood clapping and cheering as Tasha raised her fist in a silent salute. As the crowd began to disperse, Tasha stood quietly at the edge of the stage, watching the sunset. Clara approached her, holding a small handwritten card. "This is for you," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Just a small thank you for everything you've done." Tasha opened the card and read the words, "You didn't just teach us to fight, you taught us to live." Her throat tightened with emotion, and she pulled Clara into a warm embrace. As Tasha turned back to the stage, she knew that the impact of her journey extended far beyond her own life. She had built something that would outlast her, a community of strength, resilience, and hope. Tasha recorded one last video, standing in front of the banner that had become the symbol of her movement. "To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. Your support has been incredible, and it's proof that together we can make a difference. But this is only the beginning. Keep standing up, keep speaking out, and keep pushing forward." She smiled, her tone lightening. "And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know where you're watching from and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they're stronger than they think." As the video ended, the screen faded to black, displaying one final message: "Strength is contagious. Share it." With this, Tasha's story became a rallying cry for millions. Her message continued to inspire, proving that even in the darkest moments, resilience and unity could light the way forward.